Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. We're so happy to be here too. We came in from California yesterday, and it's very meaningful and really a little overwhelming to be in this beautiful space, seeing our work presented here at MOKA. It's truly amazing.
It's emotional.
I visited this museum first 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. 5 years ago. Some of you were there, good to see you again. I came home and I told John about it immediately. I said that there is this beautiful museum devoted to children's books that presents the work so thoughtfully, so intelligently, but accessibly for children and for adults who are interested in picture books. So the fact that we are here now to celebrate this exhibition of our work, it feels incredible. We feel so lucky. So thank you for being here with us.
It's very surreal to see work that was only in our houses all the way over here and presented so beautifully and so respectfully and so thoughtfully.
Some of you were here 5 years ago when I was here too. The conversation we had then was just fantastic. We're excited again today to talk to you a little bit about our work, about our collaboration, and when we're done, we want to have some time for questions with you because we really want to talk back and forth today as well. But first, we'll just walk you through our books and focus on the way that we make books together. John and I work a little differently than is typical, at least in the United States. In American picture book publishing, when two different people write and illustrate the book, the publisher likes to keep those two people separate. Most of the time, the author and the illustrator don't speak, they never meet each other, and sometimes the author does not even see sketches of the book. They will just see the finished art come in, and the publisher says, here is your book.
I have illustrated books for authors and I have no idea if they liked what I did. I've just never heard. You don't know. Mac tells me what he thinks, though.
But the way it's supposed to go, actually, is if I have something to say to John while we're working on a book, I'm supposed to call our editor, say, please tell John this. And then she calls up John and tells him that thing.
If she wants to.
And John makes a good point. We have caught editors sometimes changing the message when we call up to pass it on. John and I, though, are different because we were friends before we started making books together. We met a long time ago, in 2008, at a party that our agent threw. I always say we met at a book party. John doesn't like it when I say that because he thinks that we should make it sound like a really cool party, like a pool party or an exciting dance party.
Lots of cool stuff going on.
But it was a book party, and we became friends because we found out that we both loved the same books when we were kids. Specifically, we loved the Frog and Toad books by Arnold Lobel, which is a series about friendship. And after a few hours of talking to John about Frog and Toad, at the end of that night, I knew that I had made a new friend too.
Oh.
But John and I started working together a few months after that. Yeah. It was kind of a strange way to start a collaboration. Because almost always in picture books, the words come first and then the pictures, at least when the author and illustrator are separate. I saw this image that is up there right now on John's website that just had work that he had done, mostly work that you had done in school and then some concept work you'd done for animation.
Yeah, this was in college. This was from college. I'm usually embarrassed to show this one because in college I couldn't afford a tablet, and so I used a mouse to draw everything. And the tree was done with a mouse, that's why it looks all angly. For the illustrators here, just so I'm not too embarrassed.
Right now, John is imagining all of you looking at that tree just saying, so many angles. But I loved this picture. I thought it was so beautiful, so funny. I loved John's work immediately. I actually saw John's artwork before I met him at that party that night. I really responded to it because I found it in some ways very nostalgic. It reminded me of books that I loved reading when I was a kid, but it was not imitative. It was new. It felt fresh and unlike anything I had seen before. And this picture gave me that feeling too. So what I did, I was like, oh, I clicked it and dragged it to a folder I had on my computer where I just saved images that I loved. And John had named the file Extra Yarn. It was called extrayarn.jpg. I had that same feeling. I said, oh, and that text next to that image, this magical connection was made, right? That now there was this beautiful, funny visual, but as soon as you see extra yarn, now there's a story. Now it says, she made herself a sweater, had extra yarn, so she made a sweater for her dog. And that really is the magic of the picture book. That is how picture books work. Picture books are text and illustrations working together to tell a story. And when you do it right, when the right text is laid next to the right picture, it creates the story in the reader's mind. That picture in John's word, just the file name, that created a story in my mind. And I wrote it down very quickly. The story of a girl who had extra yarn, made a sweater for her dog, had extra yarn, made a sweater for her parents, had extra yarn, made a sweater for everybody in town, for buildings, for animals, everything. So an example of sort of flat picture book making would be to say that David sat down for his favorite breakfast, buttered toast and a slice of bacon. And the picture would then just be a kid sitting in front of a plate with toast and bacon on it. The words and the pictures are giving you the same information. A more dynamic way to tell that same piece of story would be to say, David sat down for his favorite breakfast. End of text. But keep that same picture, a plate of toast and some bacon. Now when we read the book, we're getting information from two different places. We're active. We have to listen to the words, and it makes us wonder, well, what is his favorite breakfast? What does he like to eat? And we start looking around for clues. We're looking at the picture. We see, oh, there on the table. Look, that's what he likes to eat.
Children love to work for you when they are being told a story.
I would say actually in general, when it comes to books, children are much more willing to be active readers, to do the work of understanding what a story means than adults are. Here's a practical example of text and image and filling in these gaps. So this picture book text here that I delivered to John says, so she made sweaters for her mom and dad, and Mr. Pendleton, and Mrs. Pendleton, and Dr. Palmer, and for little Lewis. That's all I said. But in my imagination, little Lewis was a baby. So I imagined this spread, this image in my head, and in a lot of ways it was very much what I intended when I wrote it, that I thought it would be a lineup and that it would be very fun to have adults, tall, 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 and then a little baby, just to give some visual interest. And when John sent back the sketches, little Lewis was this little man with a beard and a big L on his sweater. Now, I never said that little Lewis was a baby, I just said little Lewis. John filled in that gap in a way that surprised me. But I love that. And kids do this for our books all the time, too. They fill in the gaps in ways that surprise us. We're not guiding them to a certain answer. We're trying to give them opportunities to play or to surprise or just to answer a question for themselves. Our next book together, it's called Sam and Dave Dig a Hole. But on this book, from the start, it was just very interwoven.
I had made my own book called This Is Not My Hat, and it's a wide book. And because it was wide, I was hearing from some bookstores that wide books on shelves are tricky to shelf. It takes up a lot of room and they stick out. So we were trying to think of tall ideas. And we thought either tall books can go up or they can go down. And up, there isn't much up there to work with. And so down is underground.
And John and I, when we were kids, we both used to dig holes in our yard. So I said, what if two kids were digging a hole and they were like looking for treasure, like we used to do?
Other kinds of illustration are very different. Book illustration is about sequences of images rather than a still image on its own. I don't get as excited about style or colors or anything as I do about an idea for how a series of images will connect. And the connection here is that it starts low, and then as they get deeper, the text would go up and the text would line up with them, and this sequence I was very excited by.
And the pictures showed that they were just missing all of this amazing stuff, but the text never acknowledged it.
And so when they are looking at the pictures and there's new information or secrets, they feel very smart and excited and empowered. When we were first making this book, the dog wasn't in these pictures. He was added almost at the end. I was worried because I thought, the children already see the diamond. Why do we need the dog pointing it out again? It seems redundant. But the dog actually ends up, it was much funnier with him. Someone in the story being just as frustrated as we were, it turned out to work.
So some picture books can comfort or delight children, but other books can frustrate them or make them wonder.
And they don't have to solve that emotion either is important. I think that you can leave them frustrated or angry or delighted without having to make that better. The point of the book is that you elicited that feeling, and that's it. This book ends. You want
Can
to
I
talk
say
about
one
the end?
more
Yeah.
quick thing? I think so many times frustrated gets coded as a negative emotion. But if we're doing our job right, we are finding the beauty or the delight in frustration.
This book ends silently as a ghost story, sort of. They land back what looks like home, but it's not home. It's different. In the pictures, it's different. The kids like that there's not an explanation for this. They really enjoy theorizing on where they are. If it answered the question, it wouldn't be as much fun, but we thought of it as a ghost story, where the end of a ghost story...
Or at least a genre story, something
right,
unsettling.
Sure. Yeah. I was just going to say,
mystery,
yeah. The end of a mystery story isn't, and everybody was okay and happy ever after. It was, there's a scary detail at the end that says, what happened? And that's the end.
Hopefully this book, by presenting these visual gags that are really funny to kids early, is training them to look even more closely at these pictures. So that when we get to the end of the book and Sam and Dave are back at the house, they are looking so closely at the pictures that they now get a new, very surprising kind of information. Instead of an apple tree in the front yard, there's a pear tree now. There's a different flower, a different weather vane. There's even a different cat who has a different color collar.
I was worried about this. I wanted to flip this image so that when they landed, the house was on the other side and the tree was on the other side, so that it was obviously different from where we had started. I wasn't trusting that the kids would see it, that they were looking that hard, and Max said, they're gonna see it, don't worry. And I thought, I don't know. And then when we finally went to a presentation of it, and we got to the end, all these kids' hands went, they all had seen it, and Mac was right. I had an idea for a video game with squares fighting triangles and circles just sort of messing with everybody. I don't know how to make a video game.
And then I was asked to pitch a TV show and ask John if he would want to like come up with a new show with me. And so John was like, well, what about these character designs that I did for this video game? Maybe we could use that, and instead of them being these civilizations, it could just be like one of each.
One of each guy.
But before we wrote Triangle, we had done years of work developing these three characters, what they were like, how they would interact. We had 5 or 6 stories in our heads about about things that would happen in episodes, and then probably 20 more ideas of just little things. We knew these characters so well before we started making books about them.
Because of the game and the show, yeah.
I remember it so well. We were talking, we were so frustrated because nobody was buying our TV show. And we were sort of like wounded but psyching ourselves up, and we were like, should we just make books? Yeah, let's make books. We're book guys, we'll make books.
Yeah, what I wanted for this book is the two worlds of the two characters. So he has this simple world, and he's going to another world, but you couldn't just go from one to the other. You need a neutral no man's land in between.
But I loved it because I thought it was such a beautiful piece of writing. I love that sentence, they were shapes with no names. Here in the middle, the very middle of this story, there was something mysterious, something that was sort of beyond words. Because that's so much of what we're talking about, that space between words and pictures. The space between the adult reading the book and the child listening. The space between fiction and real life. In these middle spaces where language doesn't really apply, where there's ambiguity and mystery, that's where all the fun stuff happens, all the interesting. So I think that's the most beautiful piece of writing in the book, and it's a sentence that John wrote.
Are you saying I'm a better writer than you?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, it's worth saying that this is still very much a video game in my mind. This is how a little old video game would work. He walks across the landscape, and at first video games are simple, so you don't get killed right away. They have to be very clear and simple, and that's how you do a picture book. If you're setting up a new world with new rules and new characters and new things, you start simple. This is Triangle, this is his house, and then we get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more complicated, mysterious and weird, but then we've used what we've made to then now there are squares, and squares make sense now, or they wouldn't have if you started the book here.
Also, finally, when we finished these books, then they finally let us make a TV show too. It's a stop-motion show, meaning that the world is really built. It's a physical world with little puppets and real sets that they move just a little bit, take a picture, move again. Yep. So these are some photographs from the set of Shape Island. Those are their faces, which they swap out new faces to give them new facial expressions.
These are some little set drawings that I did to help show what the world would look like when it was 3D rather than flat. We didn't want the show to look like the books. We wanted it to look deeper and more complicated, but also simple. And so that's a tricky thing to explain. I built this with some friends, and this was for the show pitch. When we were showing people what the show might look like, we made these little guys just to show. But then we do drawings like this to kind of say, well, this is what it would look like, different from the book.
So those are things we wanted to show you for this. 감사합니다.
감사합니다.